all for spending part of your Sunday evening with us. For those of you who don't know me, because there are some names I don't recognize on here tonight, which is great. My name is Philip Vonada. I'm the National Grange Communications Director. And tonight's event is called What's Next, which is based on my personal favorite TV show, which is The West Wing. The president, Jed Bartlett, anytime that he's ready to move on or kind of get things ready to ramp up and get excited about something, he says, "What's next?" Because the work never ends. We all know that as Grangers. Those of us who are heavily involved in your local Grange and your Pomona Grange and your state Grange at the National Grange, we all know that the work goes on. But how do we keep that enthusiasm up? So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. And tonight is audience participation suggested, recommended, please. So we're here. We're at the end of Grange Month, which has been going on for all of April. And this is the one month that we as Grangers kind of brag about ourselves. It's the one month that we kind of really it seems like we really take pride in what we're doing. And that we really take a moment to talk more openly about the Grange. So I want to know from all of you, anybody jump in, what were some successes that your Grange had this month? It's like catch this moth here.
Bill, for Grange Month, our Pomona collected supplies and took them. We have a veterans village, is what it's called. Our county built these little pods, and they have a community room and a dining room, and it's to take veterans off the street and put them back into stable housing.
Oh, awesome.
And so we collected probably close to a ton of supplies for them: toilet paper, paper towels, razors, some breakfast cereal, cleaning supplies, laundry detergent, the equivalent of 4 Subaru Outbacks or Foresters full of stuff.
That's awesome.
And that is our Pomona community service project, and we bring it all.
Do you do that every year?
Things throughout the year, but we bring it all to Pomona that day. And I'm sure when Susie gets her hands on it, some pictures will get posted and stuff.
Sweet. That's a great project. Yeah. It's something that's super simple.
It's an awesome project. And, some of the guys will never be stable enough that they don't have to live in that kind of environment.
Right.
But we're going on almost 4 years of the village, and they have transitioned 50 homeless veterans to permanent stable housing. Got the ones that they could get through education have gotten through education. Some of them are, back on their feet, holding a job, living in an apartment. You'd never know they were homeless.
Awesome. That's a great project. What about anybody else? Any other successes during Grange Month? I'll speak from my personal Grange, Penns Valley Grange number 158, here in Pennsylvania. We recently partnered with the Penns Valley Youth Center, which happens to be my old elementary school. And we went in last Wednesday and served dinner that we provided to about 60 youth and young adults. They're all between the ages of about 10 and 18. So it's an after-school program. So we went in and served their Wednesday night dinner for them and just had a great time fellowship. It was a really easy dinner. We just did meatball subs for the kids, but they were all so grateful and so great to work with. And it was just a new project for us and a new partnership that is already proving to be pretty fruitful for us, as we were able to welcome 2 new members in the past couple of weeks. So that was a great success for our little Grange. I do have another question then. So as you're working in your communities, what kind of things work for your Grange and what kind of things work for your community? Every Grange is different. Every community is different. So what kind of events or programs or fundraising do you find work for you? And anybody can jump in.
Things involving food. We raise, we have a monthly breakfast September through May, and we raise all of our operating funds, plus most of our community service funds there. And we have a tip jar that changes monthly. So this month we did the dictionary project.
Mhm.
Last month we did the Veterans Village so that we could accumulate money. We do our scholarship. We do the Estacada Food Bank. In October, we will probably do for the Socktober. It's to celebrate Halloween. We collect socks for the Estacada School Clothes Closet, which does all the way from kindergarten through high school. So food things. We raised $5,700 for the pie auction in February for our scholarship. So we find that food brings people to our Grange.
Food always brings people together. That's true. Leah commented and said community service activities seem to be well attended. Leah, where are you from? I will agree that our community service activities in almost any Grange tend to be very well attended, as long as you're getting out there, right? Leah's Columbus Grange number 58 in New Jersey. Awesome. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. Uh, uh, so yeah, so what the main point is that different things work in different communities. And we all know that different things work for different Granges. And so one of the questions is, how do we keep our members and volunteers enthusiastic? Um, if you're as heavily involved as I know many of the people that I know on this Zoom are, burnout is a real thing. Feeling over involved, feeling like you're giving too much of yourself with maybe not enough thanks, maybe not enough recognition. So how do we keep our members engaged and enthusiastic? And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And if at any point I say something and you want to jump in, go right ahead. Last year about this time, I gave a presentation on a Membership Matters about the fish philosophy. Fish was very big in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's a simple philosophy about putting the members of, it's really about a workplace, so it's supposed to be about staff, but I took it to mean volunteers or members of your organization and putting them at the heart of what you're doing. So it's the four principles of fish are choosing your attitude, play, make their day, and be there. And these are ideas that you can easily institute into your Grange. And I've done some other programs about this publicly. So if you want to go back in our YouTube channel, so youtube.com/National Grange, and look up the March 2023 Membership Matters event, that you can find my presentation on the fish philosophy there. But in the end, I talked about there are three main goals of Grange programming. The first is that you want to make your members want to come to Grange meetings and events. The second is to create a welcoming environment for the community and your new members. And then the third is to allow the external image of the Grange to match what's happening inside the Grange and vice versa. And what I mean by that is that you could have a really glowing public image. Everybody loves your Grange. They see that you're doing great things in the community. But when they actually join the Grange, they realize that it's kind of dysfunctional and nobody seems to know really what's going on and everything just happens to fall together. But it could be vice versa. It could be that your Grange from the outside looks shabby and dingy and falling apart. But on the inside, your meetings are well run, you're having great events, your members all get along. And we just need to kind of find a way to make our enthusiasm from the inside match what people see from the Grange from the outside. So when you're looking at moving out of Grange Month, moving into the rest of the year, I've got several things to talk about tonight, but mainly it's about taking care of your volunteers, of ensuring that people feel welcomed, listened to, respected, and also not overworked. So we'll talk about all that in a little bit. But the first thing is to examine your purpose. By a quick show of hands or a yes in the chat or something like that, how many of your Granges have adopted your own mission statement? Got a no from Leah. Leah heard me talk about this, I think, last week. Got a no from Joyce. Okay. So the National Grange, we just updated our mission statement. I encourage you to go take a look at it. It's not very different from our old mission statement. But the reason that your Grange can create your own mission statement is to really define your Grange's purpose for your community. Whether it's working for the betterment of the children and youth in your community, whether it's strictly working for agriculture and agricultural pursuits. And then what that does is it really centers your Grange and gives your Grange a purpose beyond being a Grange. And so you can say, does the programming that we are doing, does it match what our mission is? And not everything has to perfectly align with your mission. There will be many things that we do that are a little outside the sphere of the mission because it might be in the Grange as a whole's mission. But you can ask yourself, if we're doing too many events, which ones don't really align with the image that we're trying to project into the community and the ways that we are trying to be known in our communities. So that helps clarify your purpose, not just for the people on the outside, but also for the people inside your Grange to know this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and this is our core guiding principle. And I would also encourage you to create a list of 10 to 15 values or visions that you have for your Grange. Things that you really hold dear, things that you really mean. Like these are the values that our Grange, every member should be projecting and living to. And then also for a vision is, where do you see your Grange in 5 years, 10 years, 25 years? Where do you want your Grange to go? And create some positive, uplifting messaging right in your Grange. This could be a really simple lecturer's program to work together to create this list of a vision for your Grange to say, this is what we stand for, this is where we're going. And then that leads into our second point, which is to set realistic and achievable goals. At the national level, we're talking a lot about SMART goals, which is setting goals that are specific, measurable, achievable. I forget what the R is, and time sensitive. I always forget what the R is. We'll get there. But it's about putting together short-term and long-term goals for your Grange. Setting short-term goals is important. I know a lot of us want to think 10 years down the road, we're going to have these things done. 20 years down the road, this is what our Grange is going to look like. But what's your Grange going to look like in 3 months, 6 months? Setting smaller goals, maybe it's a fundraising goal. We know that we want to raise $1,000 toward our siding project every 3 months. We want to have that $1,000 raised. When you meet or exceed the short-term goals, it makes your long-term goals look more achievable because you see momentum going and you're suddenly like, hey, we were able to achieve step A and B. Now step C doesn't seem that far away. It sets you on a positive, mission-driven goal. Like it sets you on the right path, it gets you moving, and it gets your members jazzed. It gets them excited about being members again and working towards something that they see little by little, you're kind of checking off that list. And long-term goals are great, so you see where you're heading. So every year or so, reevaluate your long-term goals. Maybe you can move that guideline or that goalpost a little closer. Maybe you realize you're not going to hit it, so you set a few more short-term goals to help you achieve your long-term goal. But setting your short-term goals too lofty is going to discourage your members. So if you have a goal for more membership, that's great. But don't set your first short-term goal as we're going to get 50 new members in the next 6 months. Because no offense, I don't think that's achievable. If you say we want to get 2 new members in the next 2 months, that might be a little more achievable. That's 1 new member a month. That's something that might be doable and should be doable. But to suddenly say we're going to get 50 in 6 months, that's 12 a month. And I don't know for many Granges that that's going to be possible. I wish it was. I wish we could all get there, but maybe it's 50 members in the next 2 years we want to get. And that might be an achievable goal if you all work toward it. And then setting those smaller short-term goals or those kind of steps in the middle. So now we're going to start talking about our volunteers. So volunteers are the core of the Grange, right? Every member is a volunteer. Not every volunteer is a member. Um, I know for my Grange, we have several volunteers who like coming and participating. They just don't want to join the Grange. And as far as I'm concerned, that's okay because they are helping us achieve our mission. They're there when they are able to give of their time and their talents. They're not joiners. They're, not necessarily church members either. They just would rather give when they can and not feel like they're beholden to something. And that's okay. But there are some things that you need to think about when managing volunteers and managing your members too, and even the community members who are coming to support your events. Um, and that's the first thing is getting your members and volunteers on the same page. Does everybody know what's expected of them? Does everybody have clear guidelines for what to do as a volunteer? How often have some of us shown up somewhere, and I'm sure it's happened to all of us, and we're like, we're here to volunteer, and somebody goes, great, we don't know where to put you. Has that has that happened to you? Because so that's one thing to think about is knowing that there is a task or a job for everybody who shows up. And remembering that no job is too small either. But something else you need to think about is, do you have one volunteer that seems to overpower all of the others? One volunteer who always kind of puts themselves in charge, whether or not they're supposed to be in charge. Is your the person who's organizing your event, are they acting more as a dictator instead of as a coordinator? These are things that you need to think about when you're thinking about your Grange's image and the way that your volunteers and members perceive. Maybe some people stopped coming to volunteer because there was one person or a group of people who seem like their way is the right way and that's the only way to go. And that's where your Grange leadership needs to step in and kind of have those hard to have conversations sometimes where, thank you for your time. However, we'd like you to take a step back, or we've got another job for you, or we'd like to move you into this position. Is that okay? And just making sure that everybody feels welcome and secure in your Grange. That's what we're here for. We're here to be that rallying point for the community and to get everybody as involved as possible. So if there's one or a few people who seem to overpower everybody else, is that fair to the newer volunteers or the people who really want to get involved and just don't know how? And that's also where I would suggest implementing a mentorship program in your Grange. And I know we've talked about this for years, and we talk about it all the time because it's really important. And that's setting up a mentorship program. Sometimes it's between just two long-term members can mentor each other. I don't think a single one of us on here tonight would say that we know everything there is to know about the Grange, or that we know everything there is to know even about your own Grange. And that I think we can all say that we have something to learn, whether it's about the Grange or even about the way that we interact with other people. We have things to learn. Carrie and I have known each other for several years now, but Carrie and I still have plenty of things to learn about each other. And that's one of the things that this mentorship program can do, and it is to encourage those intrapersonal connections as well, to encourage people to get to know one another's more than just as you're a volunteer, I'm a volunteer, but more to encourage that fraternal and fellowship bond that we are known for within the Grange. So one of the questions that you can start by asking your volunteers is, what do they expect? And this is from your members too. What do they expect from being a member or from being a volunteer? For some people, it's about making a direct impact in their community. That is why they volunteer. But for a lot of people, the reason that they volunteer is to build a community and to have fellowship opportunities. Many people, especially once they're retired, once their kids have moved out, that is a time where many people start to question where they belong in their community, because for so long they've been defined by their job, or they've been defined by their families, or they've been defined by, their role in their church or their school or whatever. And so people seek out volunteer opportunities and join organizations like the Grange or the Lions Club or the Kiwanis at that time, because they're looking for new fellowship opportunities. They're looking to potentially redefine themselves or to find their purpose again, to say, I now have a place that I belong and I feel like I have a purpose. And also to have those fellowship opportunities. I know for many people, once they're retired, they're not necessarily getting out as much as they used to because they had fellowship opportunities at work quite frequently. And now they might not have that built in society anymore. And that's what we can be as the Grange. So to encourage more of those fraternal fellowship opportunities is important. And then the next thing for volunteers is to provide context for them. And what that means is to make sure that everyone knows why they are doing what they're doing and how it supports either your mission or supports your event. And that's something as simple as letting the greeter know or setting somebody to be a greeter when people first walk in to say, you are setting the tone for this entire event for every person that walks through the door. And to put somebody there who you know has a cheerful personality, somebody who's going to be able to enthusiastically welcome everybody in. And that really does set the tone for the people coming in as well as for the other volunteers. Because when they hear that laughter, when they hear the joy of somebody welcoming people in, that's going to be exciting and really get people energized and enthused about whatever event it is that you're doing. I know many people, so my other Grange Eagle, where I'm president, we do roughly bi-monthly takeout dinners. And many people say one of their favorite things is that when they walk in the door, the first thing they hear is the laughter coming out of the kitchen. And it's because the crew of us that works in there all get along so well. We all know each other maybe a little too well inside that kitchen because it's not very big, that we're just having a good time. And that kind of encourages people who are coming in to get our takeout dinners to have a good time as well, because they know that it's a welcoming, fun place to be. And they see that and then they leave. And that's the image that they have of the Grange when they take with them, is somewhere that's exciting and energetic, and they are willing to talk about us and come and support us again. When you think about, I'm sure we've all been to events, not necessarily Grange events, but I've certainly been to school events where it seems like everybody was kind of a little grumpy or a little didn't really want to be there, and leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. And that's kind of when you leave, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to go support them again. So let's encourage setting a positive tone to our events and our work in the Grange in general, our work in Grange meetings, setting that positive tone so that we're all working together and encourages people to join and talk about the Grange and say that this is the place where people are working together for a common cause. And I think that's really important in setting an enthusiastic and energetic message for what's next, is that they are able to do something fun and exciting. So that's back to volunteers. I went on a little tangent there. Um, that's part of the fun and excitement is also comes from personalizing the experience for your volunteers and your members. How many of you, maybe it's not everybody in the Grange, but have your secretary or your president or even a greeter or somebody who sends a birthday card to your members on their birthday or their key or your key volunteers? How many of you know your members' birthdays? Because that's step one. Because those little touches are important. Uh, Recognizing the people who contribute to your Grange, and that's all of your members, that's your members who pay dues and don't show up as well, because we all have those. And that's recognizing them and thanking them for their contribution and thanking them for their time. And especially to say, to remember things like birthdays or anniversaries, um, when somebody's sick or can't get out, to send them a little card. And those are all things that let them know that they are a vital part of your organization. And it doesn't cost a lot. You can jump on Amazon and buy a box of like 50 assorted birthday thinking of you, thank you cards for like $9.99. And so it's the cost of that, somebody writing a little message and a stamp. So, well, and buy your stamps now because forever stamps are going up in price again. So that's one thing that's one little touch that somebody can start doing for your Grange. And especially for key volunteers who might not be members yet, is to reach out and thank them for their time and to let them know that you're thinking of them, even when they're not supporting you for some reason. Like if you have an event that they would usually be at, but they had to be somewhere else, dropping them a text or an email to say, hey, just thinking of you. We really missed you at the Grange today. Hope you are having fun where you were. We'd love to see you again. Hope you can attend our next event. Those little touches are what keep people involved because it lets them know that they are expected or that they are welcomed and thought of even when they're not there. They might not be somebody who's a regular player. They might not be somebody who's planning the events. They might just be, the woman who comes in on Sunday afternoons and cleans your Grange Hall. Um, and to say, we're thinking of you too, and we thank you for your volunteer, we thank you for your time. Those kind of things and little touches are really important to keep people together. And then that leads to learning your members' interests or your volunteers' interests. And when I talked about that mentorship program earlier, a key part of volunteering and our events is pairing people together who might not know each other. One of the things I love about the Grange is that we all come from such diverse backgrounds that we all, being a nationwide organization, we have members who are coming from the cities and we have members from the suburbs and rural areas. We have members who grew up on farms or who grew up in an apartment, these very different lifestyles that we are coming from. And while your Grange might be a little more homogenous and might be a little more, we're all relatively have the same background, there are still people whose interests are going to vary so wildly that I think it's really fun when a new volunteer shows up and you learn a little tidbit about them to say, I think you would be a great fit to work with Garrett today. And to put those two people together and put them together on a task or a project because you know that they are going to get along well. They're going to leave with a good image of the Grange and the work that we're doing, and that they're going to have a good time and feel welcomed and wanted. And those are really important things to do. Because I think one of the fun things while volunteering personally is learning about the people that you're working with. We all tell stories when we're working. We all talk about, oh, one time I did this, or, well, I learned that you should put a little dash of this in your soup whenever you're making it. Those little things are really neat touches that organizations like the Grange are some of the only places where you can do that. It's very different from other volunteer organizations where you're just kind of one cog in a much larger event. Um, in the Grange, you really are able to have that super personal touch with one another. And I think that's why our volunteers tend to stick around longer than other organizations. And it's because we are able to build those interpersonal relationships. So, any questions about volunteers? Because we're going to move into another section now. Any questions about managing volunteers, working with somebody, anything? That was just an excuse so I could take a sip of water, but anybody's welcome to jump in.
Phil.
Hey, Jane, how are you?
Good. I just want to share something.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about like where to put volunteers,
Mhm.
and this is sort of a kind of story that kind of goes way back. But when I grew up in the Grange, you know that I believe they were the Grange ladies who I'm now a member of. Uh, but one of our members who's about my age, she said when her mother joined the Grange, probably back in the 50s, she was going to volunteer as someone to help with one of our dinners. And she said, I'd like to make the gravy. She was told, no, so and so has to make the gravy. So it really kind of bummed this woman out for a long time. And then eventually, whoever the old person was died. And her name was Rachel. God bless her soul. She got to be the gravy lady. Well, eventually, don't mind her daughter, Annette, who I know, she told me this story a number of times. But then one thing I found that we were doing a dinner and she was making gravy and she was mentoring one of our young, probably high school girl of making the gravy. And that really hit me of, we can't just be where we're stuck in the past where we're saying, well, old lady, whatever's going to make the gravy. Well, somebody's got to make the gravy.
Right.
And we
That,
pass that on to the next generation. I think that's important.
that is really important. And I love the idea of, you know, Granges are known for your Grange dinners across the country, dinners, breakfasts, lunches, whatever it may be. And so to work with somebody and to actually show them this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it and this is how we do it, but also to welcome new ideas as well. Like I feel so bad for the member that was told you can't make the gravy because somebody else is doing it. Where I would rather, I would much rather be at a Grange where I'm like, oh, you want to do that? And the person who usually makes the gravy goes, great, because I'd love to take a step back. Like I want to encourage us to be passing on the things that we're doing to younger members or new members, not necessarily younger members. It's just somebody new and to pass on what we're doing so that maybe you're ready to do something else. I'm the mashed potato guy at Eagle, and I would gladly give the mashed potatoes to somebody else if they wanted to do it. I don't need to do it. I could be doing one of 10 other things during the day. So if anybody wants to make mashed potatoes, come see me and I'll get you a spot. Um, but let's work together and welcome those new ideas.
Then so you get into the tough situation where my brother, you know him,
Yep.
Don, you know my brother Don. He's the mashed potato guy. And it actually happened. One of the worst times was when my father was in the hospital. Very, very, very serious. And we had a Grange dinner. He couldn't do it because we were just overwhelmed with that. And it came to had to have the dinner, and it's like, well, somebody has to take over. Like nobody knows what to do. And then it sort of after that particular kind of epiphany, it sort of said, well, maybe we need to teach somebody else how to do it. So we can't always rely on Don to be there.
Right. And that's important too. So many of you know Amanda Berzana Rios, our National Membership and Leadership Development Director. She and I both have what's called, this is morbid, but it's called the If I Get Hit by a Bus file. And it's the things that somebody needs to know right away to be able to carry on our work and to be able to move on. And the Grange can't stop because one person stops being involved or one person can't make it to an event. So having that what I call the backbench of additional people who can step in and take over and who you've identified as potentially future leaders or current leaders who want to take on more, having these people ready to step up and step up to the plate. Chris Hamp, our national president, has been working with the metaphor to pass the baton and how we need to be ready to pass the baton to the next generation of leaders, the next generation of people to come after us and carry on the work of the Grange. You know, I realize I'm only 35, but in some ways I'm ready to pass the baton on in certain aspects of what I've done for the Grange already, because it can't be those of us who are deep in the Grange. We're not going to be able to sustain it ourselves. So we need to be ready for somebody to take over after us. So Jane, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. So then we've got our volunteers. We've worked with our volunteers. We've had things going, and now we're going to start thinking about the events and the projects that we're doing. So the first thing that I think many people in Granges need to remember is that we're not an all or nothing organization. And nobody should be. And in that, what I mean is just because you had a new idea and you did it once and it didn't necessarily go to the best that it could have, might not have been the best attended, just because you had one error or mistake or not reaching one goal, that doesn't mean that you're a failure. And I think so many of our Granges feel that, well, I didn't reach short-term goal number one, or we didn't reach the fundraising goal that we set, or, you know, we didn't make enough money on this one event that we did. That doesn't make you a failure. And what you just need to do is take a step back, regroup, take a look at your event, and figure out what you can do better next time. And maybe you decide we're not going to do this again, and that's okay. But maybe you also decide we're going to do this and we're going to do this better. We're going to find a way to make this an even better, bigger event so that we can succeed. Leah says it's a learning opportunity. That's exactly right. It's a way for you to figure out what your community needs from you. And that's something that I talked about in another event once is to find out from the people who are coming into your events, if you're holding, the monthly breakfasts, if you're holding the monthly dinners or whatever it is that people are coming into your hall, make sure you're getting touch points with those community members who are coming in to say, what does our community need from us as the Grange right now? What would you like us to do for you? And that's one way to help guide your mission. That's one way to help guide your Grange, is to know what your community expects from you. And maybe your community doesn't really know what to expect from you. And that's a great touch point too, to say, well, here's who we are. Here's what we believe in. Here's kind of the key tenets of the Grange. And then have those conversations with your community to say, where can we as the Grange fill in a void? And that will both encourage community members to come to your events and get involved. It might encourage some more membership if you start supporting projects that you might not have known existed but need more support, or areas that are kind of gaps in the knowledge of the community. That's somewhere that the Grange can step in and really make a true impact. And that will increase the enthusiasm of your members too, when they see the impact that they are making in the community. I know many Granges, especially those with older members, don't get out in the community much, and their service is more just by donating money or items, and that's perfectly fine. But some of the Granges that I see having the largest growth right now are the Granges that truly are able to put boots on the ground in their community, because then they're visible. They're wearing their Grange shirts. I've got my Worthy shirt on tonight. Um, and they're able to step in and really see how their community is directly impacted by them. And I think that's really neat. And something that we should encourage more, is find ways to get the Grange shirts in the community and to get us all as involved as possible. And then that also leads into seeking feedback and support. So feedback and support from your members, from event attendees, and of your volunteers. And I would also suggest that if you, at some point, are really reevaluating or evaluating for the first time what your Grange's mission is, what your purpose is, what your future projects should be, I would also suggest reaching out to some former members. If you have members or people in your community who have left the Grange for some reason, I would suggest reaching out to them as well and say, where did we fall short? Where did we not meet your needs? Where did we not succeed in keeping you as a member? To figure out, maybe they would come back if one or two things changed. Maybe they didn't like the ritual aspect, and so that wasn't for them. So finding a way to get them to be volunteers again could be a great way to keep them involved and maybe slowly get them back in. This feedback lets you know where you can improve. It lets you know maybe where you can scale back. Maybe you're doing too much. One thing that some Granges try to do something, every month. Some Granges try to do something every week, but they're relying on the same core of volunteers to do all of this work. So maybe taking one or two things off the schedule could actually encourage more volunteers to get involved, because they don't feel like they need to make such a huge commitment. Even scaling back from, doing every other week you do a breakfast, maybe you scale it back to once a month. And that lets people know, I only need to commit one Saturday a month instead of 2 Saturdays a month to be involved. Or I no longer feel like I can't be involved because I can't make that commitment. And I think that's something that we can look at doing, is figuring out, maybe we are doing too much sometimes, and that's burning out the volunteers that you have. And they're slowly going to start dropping off till you're just left with this small core group, and then nobody feels like they can get involved because that little group of 10 people or whatever seems to be running everything. Listening is really hard for leaders. I will admit that as a leader, that listening can be really hard for us, because we like to think that we're omniscient. We like to feel sometimes that we know what's going on and we're able to control things. And so listening can be really hard, especially when there's criticism involved. And I think that's a great sign of a great leader is to be able to stop and reevaluate what you are doing as a leader when your volunteers say that they need something from you, or when your members say that they need something from you, or they're not getting something from you. Um, as a leader in any capacity, it doesn't need to be your Grange president, it doesn't need to be an officer, but somebody who's stepped up and is doing the work in the Grange, accepting feedback, allowing others to own their volunteership or their membership, um, will empower passionate advocates for your organization. If Carrie came to me and said, I have a concern, I need you to listen to me, and I listen to her and I implement what she's saying and I give her the feedback that she's looking for, Carrie's now going to go out and say, this Grange listens to me as a volunteer, they trust me as a volunteer, and they're able to implement some of the ideas that I have and potentially bring in more volunteers with her the next time that she comes, because she now feels like she has a voice and somewhere that she belongs and somewhere that she can truly make a difference and make an impact. And I think that's something that for Granges that have had the same leadership in place for many years can really learn from is hearing those new ideas and trying something new. And it's hard and it's scary, but it's also empowering to those members who are coming in, or to those volunteers who say, I have an idea, I would love to see how this goes. And I think that Grange is the right place to do this. They already trust the Grange enough to voice their opinion or to bring their idea to you. So now let's lift them up even higher and run with it and see what happens. And that's one of the questions is your Grange open to new ideas? When's the last time for some Granges that you really tried something new? I know many Granges have these are the 4 projects that we do a year. These are the only 4 big things that we do. We don't have time or the bandwidth to do anything else. And I understand that. Believe me, I understand that. But if you have a volunteer who brings you an idea and is also willing to lead said idea, if they just have some extra volunteer support, let's see if there's a place for that, and see, maybe we can rearrange a schedule. Maybe we don't do the event in September this year and that's where we put this one, or maybe we try this in the summer and see what happens. And that gives, again, your volunteers and your members the ownership to say, this is now my organization as well. I'm no longer just a peon here. I am now somebody who has a voice. And that's what the Grange has prided ourselves on for 158 years, is that we give people a voice. So let's keep working on that and giving them that opportunity. And then that leads into providing feedback. And that's letting your volunteers know that they're doing a good job, letting them know what you expect from them next time. We talked about that a little bit ago with recognizing your volunteers in general, and birthday cards, anniversary cards, those kind of things. But one of the most important places that we can provide feedback is letting our members and volunteers know the exact impact that they are having on their community. And that's in sharing stories from the people who you're benefiting. You know, if you are the kind of Grange who likes to give money, which is great. I love seeing money go out of Granges, because that means you're making an impact on your community. Invite the people who you're giving the money to your Grange to talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and maybe you'll make a new connection there and a new partnership. That's how we got involved with the youth center, is because we invited them to our Grange to give a presentation. And we said, this is a great organization. We want to be part of that too. And it lets your members know this is exactly who you're helping. And I think that's really important, because sometimes we donate money to organizations who ask us for it, and we don't necessarily know who they are or what they do, or who they impact in your community. You might know that you are giving money to a food shelter, or a food distribution center, or something like that, and not realize that the money that you're giving them allows them to buy X number of meals that then they turn around and give to 50 families in your area. So now you know that from your donation, you are now impacting 50 families from what for you might feel like a small amount of money, or might feel like a tremendous amount of money if you don't have a lot. to know that you are able to turn around your volunteer efforts that you fundraised that money for to give back into your community, and to know that you are having such an impact from what seems like a small act of service. And that's important too. Like if you're, Joyce was talking earlier about the tip jar that they put out at their meetings or at their meals. And I think that's great too, to let them know like these are the organizations that we are touching through the tips that you're giving are going directly to, you know, this organization or this group or the veterans home or whatever it may be, and letting your community know exactly who they're impacting when they're supporting you. And that leads to celebrating our accomplishments. This is something that I have talked about since I took over as communication director, and that's, we got to brag on ourselves more, folks. April, Grange Month, is the time of year where we tend to do the most of that and to talk about here's who our Grange is, here's what we're doing. But in general, you got to celebrate your accomplishments more. There are things that your Grange does every year, every month, every week that you might feel are just simple and routine for your organization, for your Grange, that are actually huge wins for you and are a great way for you to be able to brag on yourselves, to say, you know, I heard somebody say like, well, we only were able to donate $100 this year to our senior center. I'm sorry, you donated $100 to your senior center. Celebrate that. Celebrate the fact that you were able to give that money and support the senior center. It might have only been $100, but you don't know that they might think that that $100 is the greatest gift they've gotten all year. And so celebrate the fact that you are able to make those impacts in your community. I think that's something that we feel that we do some we feel like we do enough of it. We are humble people. We say in the closing charge from the president, let us be quiet, peaceful citizens. I say, we're going to screw that. I want us to be loud, noisy citizens of our communities now, to be the people who are out there talking about the great things that your Grange is doing and how important it is to make those impacts, to make those connections. And it's because of the Grange that you're able to do that. So go out there and celebrate your wins, and don't just do it in your meetings either. Social media can take off like a wildfire when you least expect it to. So posting those small victories on your Facebook page or on your website or Instagram or Twitter, if somebody still uses Twitter, I don't know. Go out there and talk about what your Grange is doing, because you never know who's going to see that, who's going to share that post, and realize that your message can go so much further than you think that it can. And that builds a real sense of pride around the work that you're doing, so that your members and your volunteers can be proud of their involvement too. And I think that's the key from celebrating your accomplishments, is that if you feel that what you're giving is not enough, then your volunteers are going to feel that what they are giving to make that fundraising possible is not enough. And it's this chain reaction. So when you start being loud and excited about the Grange, that's going to make your volunteers want to be loud and excited too. And that leads to my final point for the night, which is to have fun. If you're not having fun in what you're doing, then why are you doing it? If you're not able to find the places to laugh and to find the places to be in fellowship and camaraderie with one another, that's all in fun. And your fun has real, tangible impact in your community, but that doesn't mean that you can't laugh about it while you're doing it. And so if you're not working with people who excite you and who make you want to volunteer even more, then why are you doing it? So I come to the Grange because I know that every person that I'm going to work with there, I have something in common with, and I'm going to be able to have a great time when I'm there volunteering. And your other volunteers are going to see that as well. So when somebody asks you what's next, you've got a ton to go off of. There's so much that's still left for the Grange, and there's so much that's next for the Grange as we look to find out what kind of impact you can have in your community, as you look to find out where you belong in your community, and what voice you can have and what voice your individual members can have. there's a lot that's next for the Grange. And that's something that should excite you too, is that the possibilities are endless. There's no end to the opportunities that your Grange can find and the service that your Grange can do and the impact that your Grange can have. So that's what's next, in my opinion. Are there any questions, any thoughts from out there? It's a quiet crowd tonight.
Phil, I'm gonna say goodnight. Susie has arrived home
I
from
saw you talking to
regionals.
somebody off screen there. I
Yep,
assumed it was Susie. Well, thanks for joining us tonight, Joyce.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Phil.
Yes, Jane.
Hey, I just want to share something. You mentioned about, joining or starting something new.
Yeah.
As you know, and a lot of people know, our good friend Jim Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
He was president at the time. We actually purchased a property right next to our Grange Hall, intending to raise an old barn for parking. And some people from the Grange, this is kind of before I became involved again, said, well, what about if we started a farm market? And basically Jim said, go for it. And we're going to be celebrating, I think, 24th year, starting in June.
Yeah, so
vendors have come and gone. Leaders have come and gone, but the idea of just saying, try it and see what happens.
Mhm.
And raising that property and making a parking lot would be
It would be
not
devastating for the
anything
community at this
interesting
point.
in the community.
Yeah.
But now it's like people come. We haven't got a lot of members coming through of actually joining the Grange, but they know what the Grange is about. They know they can come and they can get their fresh vegetables on Saturday morning and enjoy a cup of coffee, some conversation around the community table. And that's really been a blessing for our group.
Yeah, so I get a daily news brief that appears in my inbox every day, which is really cool. And anywhere the word Grange is mentioned on the internet, comes to my inbox. So it's really cool. Every week I see Plumsteadville Grange farmers market, and your schedule is always in the newspaper or somewhere that is getting picked up. So that's
one of our. She's a member, but she's a volunteer. Caitlin is publishing.
That's awesome.
Weekly about what we're happening, and we just had. We shared this with you. We just had our Grange Month event last night.
Mm-hmm.
It was a community musician event. We had about, I think, 7 bands and musicians play. A lot of oldies Americana, sing along kind of thing. And we had about 60 people come. We served soup. We had a raffle of surprises. And it was just great to see community people come together and just have a good time.
That's awesome. I love that.
And that's really what the Grange is all about.
And to be able to do that when Luke Combs was having his giant concert at Penn State and taking half the population of Pennsylvania that direction, to be able to do that and have a great turnout for you, I think that's awesome. And something, I love those kind of community events. So keep that up.
And the musicians love it because they're not playing in a smoky bar.
Right.
They're just playing to enjoy themselves and enjoy the audience, and see the people sing along and applaud, and it's just great. We're hoping to bring those people more involved in other things of the Grange, and they also perform at our farm market, which I mentioned earlier.
That's great. Sometime when I'm out that direction, I'll have to stop by the farmers market on a Saturday morning. So
Saturday mornings, June through October. Come as you want.
I'll be there.
Love to see you.
Well, if there's nobody else going to chime in tonight, I just want to thank you all for being here. I know Sunday evening, this will be posted on YouTube later this week. So if you know somebody who can benefit from this information, or if you weren't taking notes, because I know that I speak fast and furiously, go ahead and jump back on YouTube and watch in the coming days whenever I get this edited and up. I do want to tell you a couple things from the National Grange. You may have heard we've launched the Grange Hall podcast, which will come out every other Wednesday. So this Wednesday is our first real episode, coming up on May 1 with National Grange President Chris Hamp. You can access the Grange Hall podcast by visiting nationalgrange.org/Grange Hall pod, all one word. Or you can find it on Spotify or Apple or Amazon Music and Audible or Podbean. And it's also available on our YouTube channel. So there's a ton of ways to access that information that's there. And what we're doing with the Grange Hall podcast is highlighting local members who are doing great work in their local Granges, who may have a history with their Grange, who may be newish members, who may be longtime members. We're trying to show an array and diversity that we have in our membership and the great things that are happening from Maine to Hawaii and Alaska to Florida in the Granges that we have around the country. So if you know somebody who would be a great fit for that, you can email me or reach out to grangehallpod@gmail.com and we'll get them scheduled. Also, you're the first group to hear this in person. There will be a new version of the patrons chain starting in June. So it's going to be called Grange Today. It will drop down from being every week to being every other week. So the second Friday of the month will be focused on your local Granges and the state Granges. So when you have news or things that I want you to brag about, please email me, pvaneda@nationalgrange.org, with your story or your quick little write-up. I'm trying to highlight more of what's happening at the local level to inspire our members and make our members enthusiastic around the country. And then the fourth Friday of the month will be focused on national events that will include our View from the Hill newsletter. Will be a part of Grange Today. Will be part of that. And that will be where the news coming out of National Grange will be in that newsletter. So please send your information to me, get involved. I want to hear more stories from more Granges around the country. We've got 1,500 of them, so I'd love to have so much information that I can't contain it in one of those issues. I believe that we can do it. So my SMART goal is to start building up, how many people are submitting into Grange Today. And that feeds into Good Day magazine, which I encourage you all to subscribe to. It's $16 a year, either print or digital issue. Good Day magazine comes out quarterly. The April issue, we had some production issues with, but it is finally in mailboxes. So go grab that. We've got a few extra copies. So if you'd like one, please shoot me an email and I will happily send you a promo copy with information on how you can subscribe to the newsletter or to the magazine. So please do that. And thank you all for an awesome Grange month. As always, if you have any ideas for something you'd like to learn or you'd like our national staff to present on one of these Zooms, please reach out to us on Facebook, on Instagram, by email, anywhere that you can find us. We're happy to take feedback. That's one thing that we are all learning, is to accept more feedback and to be more active and engaged with our members. So please reach out to us. Thank you all for being here tonight. It is after 9:30 my time, which is past my bedtime. So I'll hang around for a few minutes, but I'm gonna stop the recording here and thank you all for being here.